Has anyone the opposite, since you don't want to give us war stories about when someone came up and confronted you harshly, did anyone ever come up to you where it was like a Sarah Jessica, where you're like, oh my God, like, you know who I am, since you are such a fan of celebrities and you were just shocked that they really knew detailed nuances of your work?
Lydia Lunch just said to me, stop writing trash. I thought that was cute, actually. And then there was Fiona Apple started screaming at me, why did you say I look like a Russian gymnast? And I was like, that was someone else in the Village Voice. I actually wrote something else bad about you. Whatever. You know what? I'm so pathetic that just the fact that they know who I am is kind of exciting. And they read my stuff. Jason Bateman was cool once because I made fun of an award speech he gave when he won an Emmy. And he said, oh, I didn't expect to win. And then he pulled out a list of names to thank that he obviously had prepared. So I made fun of that. And he came up to me and he said, you were totally right. You were right about what you wrote. And I was like, he read what I wrote and he even thinks I was right.
Wow.
That's
Nice. That's a good one. Do you ever seen anyone like when you've just wanted to avoid them, where you're like, oh God, like I just say so many bad things about this person all the time, where you're like, let me just cross the street, let me go to the other side of this party?
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes I'll enter a room like, hey, and then I'll be like, hey, everybody. And celebrity, Jack A. Harry once saw me and she went like this. Susan Sarandon went like this. I have a great influence.
And they went like that, what? Just in the sense that you've said things about
like,
them.
don't talk to me, get away. Yeah, Mark Rylance just glared at me like, don't you even think of coming near me. And I get it. And sometimes I have to go, what was it I wrote again? It must have been bad. Let me Google this.
Did you ever hear from people like a Perez Hilton and all those others? I mean, they are, yeah. They went into what they did because of you, whether they want to admit that or not.
Oh no, Perez is a friend, and he, from the beginning, gave me credit as having been a pioneer, and he gave me a lot of props, and we're friends. I mean, he did a video for my roast, and he didn't say anything bad. He just raved about me. So he's cool. I wish he would go back to being a little more snarky. I've
had him on this show many times. I mean, you guys have very similar careers in the sense that he too, people came up to him and, yeah,
he made it much bigger. But it's partly the timing. I mean, in the 80s, a writer about drag queens is not going to make it that big, but I did pretty well and I made money. I'm pretty proud of having just stuck to my guns, of being an openly gay writer about drag queens before there was Drag Race.
What do you think of like Drag Race? I mean, look, it's won Emmys. I mean, these girls go on now. Some of the queens make so much money, it's a real career. Like, do you think Drag Race has really, changed the game in a lot of senses for drag queens?
It really has. I mean, there are now two types of drag queens, those who have been on Drag Race and those that want to get on Drag Race. If you've been on, you're suddenly playing arenas, you're playing nicer venues, you're getting more money, you have a manager, you're doing these group shows that Brandon Boss puts on around the country. The local girls are the ones I have a lot of respect for because they're not on Drag Race. Some of them don't even really want to be on. They just want to do what they do and they work so hard. So, I mean, I love all kinds of drag queens, but I do appreciate that show for putting a spotlight on them and helping to up the game for them. I feel bad for the ones that year after year submit a reel and they just can't seem to get it right. But it's not even because they're not good. It's just every season they have to pick a group that will go with each other.
Right. We need like the funny one. We need like the runway one. The one who's plus size. I mean, there is always a formula to how it ends up.
I don't like when they're crying in the first episode. It's like, come on, you just got off the plane.
This is Drag Race. Like, this is, be thrilled that you're standing here, right?
Oh, yeah. And I was on a logo show for 4 seasons called Cocktails and Classics, which was Michael Urie hosting. And we would sit around and show movies and talk about movies like Valley of the Dolls and Mommy Dearest. Great classics.
It was great. I used to watch
I was like, I finally got on Logo. After, when Logo started, I was like, I've been openly gay on TV. This is going to be for me. They didn't really use me. They would use me here and there. So I was so happy to be on an actual Logo show.
Right. You're like, wait a second, there's finally a network that I'm going to be, and then the next thing you know, it's
nothing.
And it's VH1 and there you are with a bunch of college kids chasing after you. Well, you talk about, we talked about you being out and like, you said like, Boy George and outing, like you are very known for, outing celebrities and talking about it. Take me through that thought process of, out Rosie and Ellen and Jodie Foster and Boy George of like, come out wherever you are.
Yeah, I mean, this was partly a result of AIDS and the fact that it was taking away so many lives, and the government was doing nothing in the 80s. Reagan wouldn't even mention it. And we were galvanized to start screaming in the street, do something, people pay attention. And part of it was telling famous icons, come out. I'm not making you gay, I'm just saying you're gay. I'm not saying you can't come out when you want. Just me saying that you're gay doesn't mean you came out yet, but do try to hurry it up. It might hurt your career. Well, guess what? It hurt my career, but it also benefited my career, as I said. Just do it, and they did. Nathan Lane, people that we knew were gay, but we wanted them to say it. They started saying it, and Rosie, Ellen came, and then Rosie, and Rosie wasn't happy at the time when I was outing her all the time. But then we kind of buried the hatchet in Donald Trump and became friends and allies. And she gave a speech at my roast. This was a benefit for Callan Lord Clinic. And she gave an incredible speech. She had been so depressed about Trump winning president, she hardly left the house at that point. But she came out and she said, well, Michael Musto, this fag had a problem with me being a dyke. But then she said, but Michael, thank you for bringing me into the community. And as for Ellen DeGeneres, she was not upset about being called gay. She and Anne Heche were running around lesbian bars in New York making out. They were outing themselves. I was simply saying, hey, media, why are you saying they can't, best friends were holding hands at the Volcano premiere? They're not best friends, they're girlfriends. And Anne Heche even called and thanked me for an article I wrote about her. She put Ellen on the phone. So there was no acrimony there at all.
I had the pleasure of having Anne Heche on like just a few months before she passed, and it was just one of the best, like amazing. She
Yeah,
was
well, then
great.
everyone turned on her when she broke up with Ellen. And I sort of was part of that, and I felt bad. So I wrote an article for out.com, an open letter of apology to Anne Heche. And she had me on her podcast about forgiveness. She and this woman, Heather, doing a podcast about forgiveness. And we worked
Yeah.
out. I'm glad we worked it out.
Wow. Did you ever think like, and did you hear from critics of, like that, well, everyone comes out at their own time and, we all go through it. Like, I imagine you got a ton of criticism. I mean, I've seen some criticism, like, did you hear from a lot of people directly, like celebrities?
Not directly, but indirectly. But Rosie is one of the few who said something to me like, that I should stop writing about her personal